Okay, I'm going to talk about how to make the web juicier. And in a second, we'll understand what exactly that says. But before that, a little bit about me. Um, so my name is Offer. It's pronounced like an offer you can't refuse, same thing. I'm a creative developer at Interlude. I'm working with graphic designers, with filmmakers, developers to do all kinds of interactive, cool experiences. Um, and today, I'm going to show you some really interesting things. So let's go back a little bit in time. This is the Yahoo homepage, October 27th, 1997. 20 years ago, almost, okay? So we have some text, we have some images, and then let me do it all. Okay, 20 years forward, this is the Yahoo homepage today. So it looks a bit better, right? There's some more text, there are bigger images, but not a lot has changed in 20 years, right? Okay, so maybe it's not a really good example, being Yahoo and all, but let's take another example. This is the Adobe homepage in October 25th, 1996. So Adobe is the company behind Photoshop, Premiere, After Effects, all of these softwares that are synonymous with creation and creativity and creation tools. So this was the peak of creation in 1996. Okay, let's fast forward 20 years. This is the Adobe homepage today. So granted, it looks a lot nicer, right? There's a nicer color palette, there's a clear message, the images are bigger, they're brighter, but it kind of looks like an ad, right? Like an ad you'd see in a paper or something. It's very static. And again, not saying anything bad about Adobe, but this is kind of like how websites look like today. They're designed as websites. They're interactive experiences that are a bit more interactive than your average magazine or something. Okay, so let me show you a game. This is Tomb Raider from 1996 for design. 20 years ago. Okay. Fast forward in time, 20 years. This is Rise of the Tomb Raider. There's somewhat of a change in the past 20 years, right? And the change is not only in the graphics, so graphic processors, graphics have become much better in the past 20 years.
They're already here. Got to get inside.
It's much more immersive, it's much more fluid, lets the player know what exactly he has to do, and the line between where the interaction is and where the experience is, So I'd say there's a bit of a difference in how far games went in the past 20 years relative to how websites are 20 years from ago. So I'm not going to be talking about several things today. I'm not going to be talking about web design trends like parallax or flat design because they're irrelevant to the interaction. These things are fast, they come and go, web design changes. I'm also not going to be talking about gamification, which is the way of taking game mechanics and incorporating them into websites or web experiences. No, I'm going to be talking about something else, about juice. So what exactly is this juice? Juice essentially is how your site feels. When you're when your user, when your visitor comes to your website, to your experience, how does he feel when using it? How does he feel after using the interaction? So there's a really good talk by two game developers called Martin Jonasson and Petri Puho. And they say juice is typically auditory or visual, but it doesn't really need to be. It's about maximum output for minimum input. And that's the main thing. What can you leave with your visitor after he sees your website without putting too much effort into it on one hand, but leaving a lot of impression on the visitor on the other hand. So I'm going to be showing 5 ways of juicing up your website. And those are breathing animations, camera movement, particles, physics, and interactive video. For each of those, I'm going to show examples from video games. Then I'm going to show an example of how that can be achieved in a website. And lastly, I'm going to show you how that can be implemented in a website, how I did it or how other people did it. Cool, so let's start. And where do we start? I took this template from startbootstrap.com, really. Simple template I'm going to show you. You can get it off GitHub or download it or whatever. And it kind of looks like this. It's just a simple, like, generic website. It has some juiciness to it, okay? But other than that, you know, like small animations and the fact that it kind of looks okay, it's pretty standard, like any other single page site that you've ever seen. All right. So let's talk about breathing animations. What are breathing animations? So if you'll notice, in a game, when you enter the menu, so usually you have your menu options or your text or whatever, and there's something going on in the background. This example is a little dark in the projector, but you can see, like, there's a fire going somewhere, and there are clouds, and there are trees moving. Let's see another example. This one's from World of Warcraft. It's also, it's not as subtle as the last one, but there is something going on in the background, not something to distract you from the menu or from the options, but you get a sense of this thing that is alive, that is interactive, that it's not just a picture you're looking at. Here's a more recent one, a Rocket League, which is a game about cars playing soccer. Yeah, but it's fun. So you have the grass moving, and you have like confetti in the background. You get a feel, an atmosphere of where exactly is this game taking place. And this is without even entering the menu. You get that. So you see what I'm saying? There are these subtle animations. There's a subtle movement in the menu that just allows you to get a glimpse of what it is that you're going to experience, and leaves you at a place where you're not sitting in front of the newspaper, you're not sitting in front of a magazine, you're sitting in front of a computer or a tablet or something that can relay an interactive experience. Okay. So breathing animations, they make the experience feel dynamic. And they can be video-based, like we saw earlier, but they don't have to be. So I'm going to show you a couple of websites that do this. Okay, this is a website for an agency that has this really, really subtle video in the background as you scroll down the page. And this is a website for a band, who just happens to be my band, but not biased at all. And you, again, have this subtle animation of something happening in there. Okay, so let's go back to our example. And this is the same exact Bootstrap example as before, only now, let's turn on the breathing animation. And suddenly, we have something happening here. So it doesn't convey a lot of information, but at least it conveys that we're not looking at something static. Perfect. let's talk about particles. So what are particles? In video games, particles are really, really small images or sprites or bitmaps, and there are hundreds of or thousands of them, and they have this sort of animation that flows together to create all sorts of interesting effects. So they're used to create fire and lightning and clouds, water, sparkles, all sorts of the little things that just tend to appear magical, that something truly amazing is happening in your app. Um, Here's another example from a game by Blizzard called Hearthstone, and they make extensive use of particles. So this is a card playing game, card collecting game, where this is a screen where a user opens up card packs. So you see particles here around the cards. Let's see him open up a pack of cards. And you see there are particles that tell him exactly what type of card it is and what type of rarity a card is. They can, in a second we'll see them used for enhancing the opening animation of the cards. So we'll see that in a second. So you see particles here in the background. There are particles as the card is being revealed. Oh man, this guy is taking his time. Okay. And again, it adds this little extra thing. You might have not noticed it because it's so relatively subtle, but it's there and it just helps to amplify the experience. Okay. So particles add a sense of magic and mystery to whatever it is that you're doing. And they're also an efficient solution because you don't have to animate every single particle. You don't have to animate hundreds of things. You just use a particle generator, a particle library, or whatever, and that does it for you. Let's see how we can make that use in our example. Just click, turn on particles. I wish it was this is used every website. And now we have a button with particles. So granted, this is not the most complicated particle animation ever, but it's something that draws more attention to the button while still not being like overly, attacking the user's senses by showing him colors and jumping around and saying, click here, click here. Yeah, very juicy. So there's another extra thing that if you just hover this, and suddenly it becomes like, ooh, particles, even more magic. Cool. Okay, so how did I do that? There's a JavaScript library called Proton, and they have all sorts of really cool examples on how to do these sorts of things. So just let's click at some of those at random. That's one. That's another. It's an open source library, so you can just have a look at the code and see how it works and just see how you can incorporate this into your app or site or whatever. Their documentation is a bit lacking, but they have enough examples that you can kind of go over this and see the cool stuff that you can do on your own. And it's quite mesmerizing to look at it, even if you don't have a site to look at. So if you have a free 5 minutes or an hour or 10, depending on how bored you are, you're welcome to take a look. Okay. Let's talk about camera movement. So before I show you this, there's a clear distinction that happens between video games and websites, where a video game has characters, it has items, it has an environment. So in essence, it has a world that the game lives in. And with site, we don't have that much. We have like a page and pretty much that's it. But it doesn't have to be that way. So in a video game where you have a world, you have a camera because someone is looking through that world. So in this example, you have a character running around, firing rockets or whatever, destroying the entire place. And you see when something happens, the camera shakes, as if there's an actual camera filming this guy. So whatever he does, whether it's firing something or destroying place, it feels like there's a lot of weight to what he does. And that is camera movement, or screen shake. But it doesn't have to be all about explosions and rockets and whatever. Even if you have a really silly 2D game with a car jumping, a little bit of camera movement can add a lot of character to whatever it is that you're doing. So camera movement adds realism and drama to your website. And it can also serve to convey a meaningful action that the user did, or just to reward him for something that he's done. How can we do this in a website? So in a website, we don't really have a camera, again, because we're looking at this flat 2D space most of the time. But we do have some motion, and that motion is through scrolling, which is a very natural behavior for the user. So in this example, we have a link to the contact form, where there's a contact form down on the page, but we can make it better. We can add camera movement. And now, when I click on contact, suddenly this action has meaning. It has a weight behind this. I've clicked contact. Something happened. And this is way more fun than it was before. You could do this for hours. But I won't. That's okay. Cool. So, how to implement this? I'd suggest starting with a CSS library like CSS Shake, which has a lot of different types of shakes that you can use, which are also fun to play with and poke around. In my specific example, I just did this CSS animation manually, but you can just look at this. It's also open source to try it out and see how they did it. And then it's just a simple matter of adding the proper CSS animation at the right time. I mean, that's the fun thing about it. It's just coding up a simple animation, putting it in the right time, and it makes all the difference. Okay, let's talk about physics. So, before I show you this, what are physics? So you know what are physics, but what are physics in games? So there are physics-based games, which are games that utilize physics to implement their core mechanic. So it's not like Mario, where nothing is actually physical and the jumps that won't make sense in real life. There are games where the physics is tied directly to the game core. And what I mean by that is that there's a task that the user needs to accomplish, and he does that by trying trial and error of utilizing the physics engine in the game. So an example of this might be this game called Kerbal Space Program, in which you have to construct a rocket. And since none of us are rocket scientists, it never works, unless you're really good at this game. And the fun part of this is just trying to experiment. And most of the time you fail, but it's fun because you don't know exactly what to expect. So this is a game you probably know, Angry Birds. Angry Birds is a classic example of a physics game. Your task is to launch birds at pigs so that rocks fall on them and kill them. But if I just describe that to you, that doesn't really sound fun if you've never seen the game. But it is a fun game. And why is that fun? Because you never know exactly what's going to happen. You never know exactly what it is that you need to do to make the level complete. It's unpredictable. So in real life, you know that if you take a rock and you throw it, there's a certain trajectory for that rock. But even if in real life you try to throw the same rock twice, it will never fall in the same place. And that's because of all the small variations that you have in real life. You have those same variations in a computer game, and that's why Angry Birds is so much fun. So physics had a sense of fun and excitement, but they also let users experiment, which is something that you rarely see in websites. And it's a familiar system because we know from our first-hand experience how physics work. But even though we know how it works, we don't know what the outcome will be. Okay, so this one is a little tougher. How do you implement physics in a website? So there are examples of physics in interfaces. For example, in the iPhone, where things bounce and wobble around. But I wanted to do something a bit different. So we have this contact form where I can put like my name, and if I can put my email. Don't spam me, please. And if I put something wrong in the email, I get this validation error, which is it's an ugly way of doing this, but it's like a simple, boring validation error. But what if we turned up the physics? And now, if I do something wrong, okay. So, yeah, Chrome took over my example. It's kind of annoying. The form falls apart. I can still write though. Okay, but it goes back in, and so I can fill it in. But you see just what happened. It's a boring form of a name, an email, and a message. And just by doing something that you kind of expected, I said the form would fall apart, but you know what that means in real life. What does that mean in a form? So with a little bit of work, I didn't program in the animations. I just told them, like, listen, run physics on it, and it's fun. So let's get back to how to implement this. So this I did with a library called Physics.js. It's a really cool library that lets you do this stuff in the browser. They have like all sorts of examples. Let's take supermarket catastrophe, and then you have this. Yeah, it's fun to look at, even if it doesn't do anything. So you just need to apply it in the right places, and it does all the magic. Okay. Interactive storytelling. This is a thing games are really good at. So unlike seeing a movie or a TV show where there's a set and linear plot, and you see it from start to end, hopefully, and that's it. Video games give you this option of changing the narrative, which is kind of a big thing. There's a company called Telltale that does video games which are entirely based on this experience. They're doing something that's kind of similar to choose your own adventure books, where you start with a narrative plot, and then there's an option, like you flip to a different page in the book, and the plot changes. So they do something kind of similar. So this is from their Game of Thrones game.
I'm just trying to make light of the situation.
Fucking pig farmers.
Okay. So you have a character, you're playing this character, and then you have several choices throughout this game. For example, it could be a choice in a dialogue, so what does your character say, and according to what it said, what the outcome is going to be. But it can be, the choices can be more extreme, like you have to click something at a certain amount of time, or you have to not do something in a certain amount of time. You can choose what the behavior of your character is going to be. Is it going to save someone? Is it going to kill someone? And those choices are going to impact the rest of the experience. They have consequences. And consequences is not something you see often in website. Right? You have a website, and if you go to the About page, or if you go to the Products page, it doesn't really change what happens in the rest of the website. So we can do better. We can do something different. So I'm going to show you for that. So interactive video responds and adapts to user choice, which is unlike linear when you see YouTube or whatever. And it allows them to lean into rather than lean back. You're not just sitting on your couch waiting for something to happen. You're engaged in the experience. You're making choices. You're interacting with it. You're an active participant in the story rather than just going with whatever it is the director or the writer decided that you'll be doing. I mean, they decided everything that you'll be doing, but at least you're feeling that you have a choice and a say in the matter. Okay. So let me show you a project, a thing that I've been working on in my daytime job, and that is doing these exact sorts of things, experiences which allow you to do interactive video. And this is not a game, this is running in the browser itself. So, see if the sound works.
I'm sorry. Oh my god. Jill!
Oh my god! Wow, it's you!
That moment when you vaguely remember someone that totally knows you. Help Jill remember just when and where they hung out and what his fucking name is.
It's been a minute, Jill. How are you?
Oh, I'm really good, yeah. And how are you? Tell me anything, everything.
Oh, you know me. Just same old me. Except, you notice anything different about me? One little irregularity.
What should I pick?
Yes, I know.
It's like a unique, different thing.
Yeah, it's your neck scar.
My scar? Everyone can see how deformed I am.
I'm so sorry.
You know, it's no fun being a former conjoined twin. You're not even supposed to remember anything from that time, and that's the only thing that I remember.
Yeah, so have you noticed that the movie just went on smoothly without even, it didn't pause, it didn't jump, it didn't go to another page. So that's part of this interactive video. It just adapts in response to what it is the user is doing. And that's the thing you can also do with your website. It doesn't have to be a narrative. It could be an ad. It could be an interview. Whatever it is, it just works so well on web without the user having to download anything. It's just ingrained into the experience. That was it. And how do you implement this? You can go to developer.inter.fm, and there are examples and there are tutorials on how to do exactly that and incorporate interactive video into your app or experience to make it more game-like, not just this static experience like websites currently are. Okay, so I've given you a lot of tools now, and I showed you a lot of cool things. But there's something that I want you to remember. And that is, with great power comes great cliches. And don't overdo it. So there's a question of, I just showed you how to do all of those sort of things, and I'm just telling you now not to do them. Even the good games don't do everything that I just said. You have to remember that just because it looks cool, you really have to keep in mind what exactly it is, what is the feeling that you want to convey to your user, to your player, to the person that you're creating this thing for. So particles might work in one screen, and interactive video might work for some other part of the experience. And camera shake is good, but not all the time. You need to, after you design, after you create, after you do this thing, you need to take a step back and say, okay, does this work? Does this add? Or did I just destroy everything and it's just cool for me? Great. So that was me. Any questions or applause? Feel free to ask about even technical things. Yeah, go ahead.
As far as the frame rates go, and how effective are these things? Is it going to work in all the browsers? You have to have Chrome 97.
So no. It's all of the things I've shown here are things you can actually use. None of them are so heavy that would be, that wouldn't run 60 FPS. But again, it's also a matter of how much are you straining the browser. It works on mobile. All these things work on mobile. And you need to ask also, what is your target audience? Are you aiming for mobile? Are you aiming for desktop? Are you aiming for tablet? But in any case, it works on most of the latest browsers. I wouldn't bet on like Edge or something. But for Chrome, for Firefox, yeah, all these are just simple. Either CSS, which has been supported for the past 10 years or so. WebGL is supported. JavaScript, it's just simple JavaScript. So there's nothing really special. There's no plugin. There's nothing. It's just simple JS and CSS and HTML. Yeah.
I love the form breaking up.
The form breaking up, yeah.
I'm looking at that website. I'm talented enough to make it. Is that a tool or is that something you have?
So the question was whether you're talented enough to make it?
Yeah, I'm not.
I don't know you, but
But like some of those were, some of the other websites had things that were sort of things you could use.
So with the form breaking up, that was actually not complicated at all. With any physical engine, the way it works is you define physical bodies. You define like a world, a playground in which your physics simulation works, and then you define a body, like whether it be a circle or a rectangle or one of those. And then you say, what is its size, what is the mass, what are the forces acting upon it, and then you just let it run. In this example, I made 10 rectangles, attached them to DOM elements, and that's pretty much it. There's nothing else to it. So you do need to play around a bit with the API, and if you're not familiar with physics or how physics work or how CSS works with JavaScript or something like that, there's some work to be done, but it's not a lot of work. And specifically with Physics.js, they have really, really good documentation and really good examples. So you can just, pick your way through an example and slowly go about doing that. Yeah, go ahead.
Does the physics library interface with animation libraries like GreenSock?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the question was, does the physics library interact with animation libraries like GreenSock, GSAP? So the way physics simulations work is that on every loop, on every run through the physics engine, it changes the position. So you can change the speed and then it changes the position. But if you want to do, for example, something that works outside of the scope of physics, so if, for example, you have a circle that's moving on its own, regardless of the physics simulation, so no forces act upon it, what you need to do is set the body to be outside of the scope of the physics simulation. And then you can move it around wherever you want, using any library you want, whether it's CSS animations or it's just HTML or GreenSock or whatever. And then once you're done with the animation and you want to bring that object back into the physics simulation, you just bring it back. There's an attribute specifically in this library called the treatment, where you define if it's an object which physics act upon, or is it something that's outside of the scope. So you can change that on the fly. Yeah. Go ahead.
The background animation, is that something that you create as a video, or do you have
It's exactly a video. It's nothing more than a video. If I can show you on the I can show you on the page that that if I open the dev toolbar, then here's the header, here's the particle container, which doesn't really matter, and the video is here. Okay, see, it's just a simple video element with a source of an MPEG. There's nothing to it. So That's in case you go the video route. So you do something like in After Effects, so just plop it down in your web page. But you can also do something just with CSS animation. If you have a moving background or something like that, then you don't have to do a video. But that's also an option. Cool. Anyone else?
Part of the template.
What? Sorry?
It's part of the template.
The video is not part of the template. But everything that I've shown you, all of the examples here, are available on my GitHub, and there's a link over here if you want to take a look at the code. So you're welcome to do that. And if you have suggestions or whatever, that'll be cool too.
We'll see it on Slack, right?
Yeah, that'll be also on Slack, yeah. Cool? Did you guys like it?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.